my name's Derek Wade, Derek W. Wade if you want to Google for me. Otherwise, you will find, I think, a lot of football players and weightlifters. I have played football badly. I have lifted weights weekly, but that's not me. So, and I tweet at Derek W. Wade, and I've got a hashtag for this talk and the concepts for this talk, which is wide mind, and we'll see why that is going forward. So the title is Agile Leadership Strategies Winning the War on Complexity, and behind that maybe rather pretentious title, I really want to expand some notion of what it means to work in the 21st century and what it means to deal with complexity, and specifically this thing called emergence. Complexity, when there are so many interconnected parts, the behavior of the system overall, of the system of parts, is really hard to predict from analyzing the individual parts. Complexity, when there are so many interconnected parts, that changes to some of them can cause unexpected changes to others of them. Does this sound kind of like work? A little? Yeah, so, you know, quick check, right? If we look at business 30 years ago versus business now, would we say it has become simpler? No. All right. Just checking. Good. Then we're all here in the right talk. So this is not going to be about stories. This is not going to be about stand-ups. This is about working with systems of human beings doing knowledge work in the face of complexity. So I want to illustrate that, and we opened with some fireflies. These fireflies are actually, it's video captured in along a river in Thailand. And these fireflies display both complexity and emergence. Emergence, the key thing here, is when the behavior of the overall system is different from the behavior of its individual parts. And that's really critical, because when we start treating a complex emergent system simply by looking at all its different elements and doing analysis of each individual item, we're going to miss the big picture. The cool thing about these particular fireflies in Thailand is that every now and then, just for no reason, they don't behave like the fireflies that we see around here, where they just kind of flash randomly. They suddenly start grouping and flashing in sequence. Why? There's no boss telling them to flash in sequence. They're not following the scaled flashing process to be able to flash in sequence. Complexity brings emergence with it, and if we understand that, then we can actually beat complexity at its own game using the tools that it gives to us. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can beat complexity at its own game. I want to give a couple of tips about how we might actually apply that to how our minds work as complex systems of humans working together, and close with a little bit about what that means for leadership, whether we have leader in our title or not. So first, an exercise. I will demonstrate first, so don't worry, you're not on the hook yet, but I will need you to form together in trios, form together in groups of 3, and you'll need to sit close together. Someone in the center, someone on your left, and someone on your right. 3 people, someone in the center, someone on your left, and someone to the right. And you'll need to be close up. Hunker up. If you haven't met each other yet, now's the time to meet. All right, so here's the analogy. So the analogy is the simulation here. The analogy is for complex product development work, where, say, the person on the left, let's say that you're head of a user experience department or user experience organization in your organization. And you and your people know what your customers need. And the person on the right, you are the head of the technology department in your organization. And you and your people know what's actually possible. And the person in the middle, you have the unenviable job of product manager, where your job is to create the product roadmap for the next 3 months based upon the user's needs and the market's needs and technology's limitations. Now, since we don't have time to actually do that, we're going to make it a lot more simple. And instead, product manager in the middle, what you're going to do is to sort letters from the alphabet. I know it's not as exciting as product road mapping, but it does apply. And here's how this will work. I will present some letters. The person on the left and the person on the right will read those letters to the person in the middle. Why? Because the person in the middle doesn't have access to the screen. The person in the middle, you will have to look away from the screen. Look down, look up, close your eyes. You may not write, you may not use scratch paper. as everybody is reaching for the scratch paper. So that's what happens. Person on the left, person on the right sees letters, shares them to the person in the middle. Person in the middle sorts them mentally, comes up with a sorted A and B, and then the next two letters come. Person on the left, person on the right, get letters, share them to the person in the middle, person sorts them, and then when all is said and done and all three letters have appeared, the person in the middle should now have in their heads a sorted sequence of alphabetical letters, which we will then check. All right? Clear? Questions? Anybody? No paper. If you're afraid of getting fired for doing this in front of your boss, see again, no phones, no external aids. It's just a simple exercise. We will do it in a better way soon. Okay. On your marks, get set. Here come the letters. Go. Okay, we should have a roadmap. Check your work. Eyes up, check your work. How many of you got the correct sequence? How many got the correct sequence? 1, 2, 3. All right. But that's it. That's it. 4. The product roadmap is over. We have to communicate it up to the C-suite. This is what we got. All right, so that's what knowledge work is like very often in our organizations. So sorters, was that fun? No. Too fast, letters being thrown at you, distracting, right? People yelling at you while you're trying to sort. Readers, it's a nice job if you can get it, right? People reading to the left and right. But there's an element there of maybe feeling like your coworker is a little slow, maybe feeling like your job is a little mechanical. Yeah, all right. So here's what happened from a systems perspective. Here's what happened from a science of mind perspective. Number one, we had an ineffective mental representation of the world. We had to just keep it in our heads. Number two, as a team, we had a poor awareness of our teammates' capacity and capability. Number three, there was mental overhead. There was mental waste. Everyone wanted to use their phones. Everyone wanted to use their paper. But because I gave you an artificial limitation, number 4, of having to work inside your head. So remember this example because we're going to come back to it. And this is a snapshot, if you will, of frankly, most of the organizations that I have worked with for the past 10 years about how we do knowledge work. We would like to do better. So let's try a different thing. This time, everybody can look at the screen. This time, everybody sorts. This time, in your last maybe 5 seconds or so, cross-check your answers with each other. All right, where the letters aren't up yet. You'll have the same amount of time, and there's one additional wrinkle. Since senior leadership was so excited with how the 3 of us managed to get our product roadmaps done on time, this time we're going to get all our market data and all our technical data all at once. So all the letters are going to appear all at once. Ready? On your marks, get set, go. Or you don't have to be loud. And time. Check your work. How many trios got the correct answer? Quite a bit more. All right, so just in terms of performance, and yes, I am a nerd, and yes, I do get into geeking out about the human mind and about complexity and emergence, but just in terms of delivering performance, we did better. Here's what happened under the covers. You were getting immediate feedback. Number one, you were getting immediate feedback between your mental picture of the world and the world in reality. Number two, your teammates had your back. You had cross-check and shared thinking, if you will, shared cognition. Number three, you had more focus. You weren't being distracted by sorting and listening at the same time. You were goal-centered. And number four, you didn't have to hold all the information in your head. We didn't have to trust in the wetware. We could use the screen as a scratch pad. All right, this is what we want to see in effective teams and effective systems. And this shows some truths about humans doing knowledge work. The good news about humans doing work together is that we're actually really good at beating complexity when it comes to working in the physical world. If you think of a soccer team, for example, a soccer team has to, if we look at the value stream of a soccer team, play by play, the soccer team has to, on the left-hand side, rapidly apprehend the situation, come up with some options to maybe get the ball back on their side, make some attempts to do that, like flank this player or scare this other player, and then some of these attempts, if they work or don't work, go with the one that actually does work until they achieve their goal and get the ball back. Humans are great at beating complexity rapidly, accurately, and continuously in the physical world. We're evolved for it. We've got millions of years of skill doing this. The bad news is we're not so good at doing it in the intangible world of software and ideas and products and services because we can't see it. And the reason for that is because of another truth about human beings. So when we try to deliver value through this stream, effective is not having to go backward, so reduced errors, and effective is short time from recognition to proper action. Not just I did something, but proper action because we apprehended the world correctly. And the reason why we're not so good at doing this in the intangible, knowledge-based world is because, unfortunately, our view of the world is a big fat lie. This is from basic cognitive science, this is from human physiology, this is from how minds work. If you think about optical illusions, which line is longer? Oh, they're both the same. If you think about phantom sensations, tingling, weird pains that you're not sure where you get them, when there's no injury, even in the physical world, our awareness of reality is distorted. And this is Christina Currow, cognitive scientist at UMass, and she works in speech pathology, so she knows what she's talking about. In knowledge work, what we're actually doing is we're continually making a mental picture of reality. And that's a case of beer. We're continually making a mental picture of reality. And so there's some cognitive science studies that actually gave people artificial models of fictitious islands and said, study this fictitious island. And then now we go away from the fictitious island and we're going to ask you questions about it. How long does it take to get from the scientist to the coffee shop? Would it be faster to go from the lake by the coffee shop? And then we would measure people's response times. And we could determine that some answers came out within milliseconds, some answers came out within tens of milliseconds to show that actually there is some kind of a mental picture of the world in people's heads or in people's minds. I shouldn't say in their heads. It's not necessarily baked into the brain. So when our mental maps of reality get out of line with reality because we can't actually engage and see reality, we start getting real problems. This is what complexity looks like these days. This is the 21st century world of work. We've got a typical software system, lots and lots of lines of code, typical project, many different stakeholders, typical bit of work, we're doing regularly, frequent hourly commits. That is a lot of interacting parts affecting each other. That's complexity. That's complexity on the order of the International Space Station. And the International Space Station is a physical object, and we train really, really hard to fix the International Space Station. We're dealing with an invisible International Space Station every time we work on a software project. We can't even see it, can't touch it, it just exists in our heads. In the 19th century and in the 20th century, when our main industry was construction, the science of materials informed our work. But the science of mind doesn't really strongly inform our work in the 21st century, and I would like to change that. So we started seeing problems with that happens. The WannaCry ransomware virus that people said, oh, I knew that was going to be a problem, but yet there weren't symptoms put into place. The healthcare.gov website, when it launched, even though people knew there were going to be problems with it, it launched with the problems. So why am I interested in this? So 100 years ago, so no, I'm not that old. 100 years ago, when cognitive science was formed, it came out of psychology and a lot of sort of esoteric disciplines. And then about 50 years ago, it got refined into an actual repeatable science, a social science. And about 30 years ago, I got interested in it. And I studied artificial intelligence, computer science, cognitive science. And I was very fortunate to, out of my undergrad, have an opportunity to work with the Santa Fe Institute, which actually studies complexity in all its forms. About 20 years ago, I became a pilot and flight instructor and learned from an interesting discipline actually practical applications of the science of mind to how people work together. And for the past 10 years, I've been working on applying lessons from those disciplines to how we do knowledge work in Agile, and how we do Agile appropriately to help enable effective teamwork. So the bad news on all this stuff is that, so the good news is that there's lots and lots of literature to read, and there's lots and lots of studies. The bad news is that it's not really comprehensive anywhere. I would love to point you to a book. Apparently I have to write it because there's no one source that you can go to find a distilled science of mind for service work. However, there are 3 disciplines we can learn from, and they are disciplines where performance is absolutely critical, and they're disciplines that are absolutely bathed in data. So they've been able to do actually good science and not just fad of the day. The military, healthcare, and aviation. The military calls, had a term for what happens when our picture of reality is different from what's happening on the battlefield. And they call it the fog of war, or the modern term is VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that describes a lot of our work today. About 30 years ago, clinicians were looking at what they called sentinel events, situations where people's lives were at risk or where there were actually, unfortunately, patient deaths, and tried to find out what was some of the common causes here. And one of the common causes was, quote, divergent perceptions of what was supposed to happen among the clinicians. And in aviation, we see this a lot. The phrase in aviation is called crew resource management or cockpit resource management. Basically, it's that the controllers and the flight crew and people in the flight crew are not on the same page. So, all right, so lesson, get on the same page. How often do we hear that? How often do we say, you know, we all need to get on the same page? If that were easy, just saying it would make it happen. And in reality, it doesn't often happen. So there's some cognitive science terms for this. My term for it is wide mind. The mind that is formed by all of us together when we are working on a problem. The shared mental picture of reality. And a good wide mind is accurate. It matches reality. It is updated regularly and continuously. So in other words, it doesn't get stale and out of date from reality. And it is shared amongst us. And we can apply lessons from the military, from the clinical world, and aviation to help us make an effective wide mind amongst our teams so that our Agile tips and tricks actually help us as opposed to harming us. So beating complexity in knowledge work is not just getting the ball down the court. It is rapidly, accurately, and continuously updating our map of reality so that we can take effective action on the whole complex system without having to stop to analyze every single part. Remember the old days? We could do a process change by mapping the as-is process and designing the to-be process and mapping the change curve from one to the other. These days, around the time you're getting halfway through mapping the as-is process has changed. You've been outmaneuvered by complexity. We need to rapidly, accurately, and continuously update our shared map of the world in such a way that we can take the right action and adapt to opportunities as rapidly as they change. So whether it's solving a complex deployment failure, hey, something happened. Hey, I've got an idea about how we might fix it. Oh, we've learned from how I tried to fix it that that's the wrong way to do it. Now I found root cause, now we've solved it, now we're not going to have deployment failures again. That's what we want to get to. So in order to do this, we need to understand 2 things. Emergence, where the behavior of the whole system of people and technology is different than the behavior of all its individual parts, and we'll get to that towards the end. And we need to understand some common truths about all the elements in the system. Common truths about human beings, common truths about human minds. If you understand some truths about fireflies, you can actually affect a whole swarm of fireflies. If you understand some common truths about human minds, you can affect a whole organization of human beings who are working together to do complex product development. So, there are many truths, and I'm going to go with just 4 of them today. So the truths are that, and actually to turn them into some practical advice and some tips that you can use to help enable a wide mind in your organization. So these are the 4. Challenge your maps of reality. Maintain awareness of the team, not just the tasks. Manage your cognitive workload and the cognitive workload of your teammates, and use something called boundary objects. Tip 1, challenge your maps. Another little exercise. I'm thinking of a word. It's a 4-letter word, and it's a 4-letter word meaning intercourse. What do you think it is? Why are you laughing? All right, so here's what happened. For some of you, you pervs, your mental model of the world was maybe not quite aligned with reality, namely the word that I was thinking of. Now, to be fair, there was a trick there. I was setting you up for that. But what happens when our mental map of the world isn't aligned with reality? We take actions based upon that map of the world, and those actions don't get us the results we want. And then, because we are loath to change our picture of the world, what we do is we go back and take a different action from the same picture of the world. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Brittle organizations do this. Brittle coaches and brittle leadership and brittle organizational facilitation does this. Act. Stop analyzing. Don't ask me those stupid questions. Get it done. Flexible, adaptable organizations ask, okay, what do we think we know that just ain't so? When we have that little giggle moment, or when we have that, that's weird moment, don't just try a different action coming from your same picture of the world. Question your picture of the world. This is one of those things where the defining moment just before a scientific discovery is not eureka, because that's I know what I'm about to find. The defining moment just before a scientific discovery is, that's weird. That's the key that maybe our picture of the world isn't quite in line with reality. So we should challenge our pictures of the world all the time. True story. I was doing a Kanban implementation, kind of a troubled project. It had been going on for 4 years. I came in for the last, say 4 months of it or so. Was working with the C-suite, and in a conversation between 2 members of the C-suite, I will not identify them by title because I think you can draw some inferences from that. I presented the data. We had been measuring flow, we had been measuring throughput, and we had been measuring a delivery from not just from idea to staging, ready for production. So this was empirical evidence about what was happening in the system. And the conversation was very interesting. And the conversation that I was presenting was, we're not going to make it. If you want to do everything that you are proposing to do by the deadline that you say that you want to get it done, you're actually going to be 1.5 years late. If you want to get it done by the deadline that, that we've got a cutoff, you're going to deliver about 30% of what you can actually do. This, as you can imagine, was a difficult conversation. This was bad news. And the reactions of the 2 was very interesting and showed that one had a mindset of challenging their mental picture of the world, and the other had the mindset of remaining complacent in that mental picture of the world. The one said, I see you have some tests and data. I think we should take this as some truth. The other said, I'm not sure that this is right. I think we're going to make it. Hope. Hope is not a strategy. The one said, so what you're saying here is we're going to need to come up with some contingency plans, an insight about a new action. The other said, I reject this because, well, didn't essentially say this, but was essentially saying, this is going to get me in a lot of trouble. This is to my disadvantage. I don't like it. So when we start seeking data for advantage's sake, we might be staying complacent in our models. The one said, okay, so what we're seeing here is a complex interaction between our subject matter experts, our testers, and our product managers. And we need to reorganize and share some information in order to be able to solve this. The other said, we'll just throw more developers at it, and then we'll get it done on time. Right? Easy solution. That'll be easy. And the one said, when I said, look, into the difficult silence that followed, I said, look, I really am sorry to be bringing this news. And the one turned to me and said, Derek, I would rather manage this company based upon reality. And the other said, I'm just not sure about this. This doesn't fit with what I know and my past experience. So when you embrace the cognitive dissonance versus when you say, oh, I'm seeking confirmation, that might be a sign that you're challenging your models. And don't just challenge other people's models, challenge your own. I stay complacent in my own models all the time. It is absolutely possible to find data to back up your own confirmation bias. So here's Jesus arriving in Jerusalem on the donkey, and the donkey has really good evidence that everybody there is totally glad to see it. The donkey is the object of everyone's adoration. If you don't challenge your maps of reality, just like this donkey, you might be making an ass out of yourself. Tip 2, wide mind is an emergent phenomenon and tasks are only half of the parts. So we manage tasks really, really well. Feature, epic, story, task, break down the work, yada, yada. Interesting thing that we don't do in knowledge work that we did do in software. Back in the 80s and 90s, object-oriented programming was this new weird thing that was really, really cool, where we had the data and the functions together. And we got a lot of return on that because we kept our data and our functions together. But we don't do that with human minds. We treat being on the same page as just, we've got shared data, common database. What about common methods? Wide mind is emergent, and it comes from human minds working together, not just human data working together. So we want to make awareness of our team and our teammates and people explicit. Not just what do I need to do, what do you need to do, but what do you think we need to do? What do I think about what you think? Who can help us? There are many ways you can do this. One way I have used is any time that there's an opportunity for a stand-up and it's what are you working on, what are you going to work on, what are your impediments, I'll throw in a fourth question. How are you feeling today? I had a product manager say, Derek, can you call me after the stand-up? Yep, okay, John, no problem. Derek, what's with the touchy-feely question? I said, well, John, just trust me on this. It's something that I want to use to kind of pull the team. Okay, you weirdo. 6 days later, thank you. 6 days later, David, one of our team members, answered that with, and usually it's fine, good, everything's fine. 6 days later, David answered that question with, I'm kind of cooked. Serena asks, why are you cooked? Because I stayed up really late last night. Why did you stay up late last night? Because I was trying to refactor this particular package and I ran into a whole lot of trouble. We uncovered a significant architectural issue that was not in the plan. And the 3 questions didn't pull it out. This one did. Paweł Brzezinski of Lunar Logic experimented with this thing on the bottom called a Niku board, which is Japanese for happy face. And it's basically posting a little sticky every day about how you're feeling that day. And Paweł had a really interesting story where he said you could watch the faces on the Niku board as a leading indicator for technical challenges and technical problems. When he saw the faces start turning to frownies, it was about a 2-week leading indicator that there was a big, gnarly technical issue that needed to be uncovered. Make team awareness explicit. Tip 3, manage cognitive load. Maintaining wide mind and a shared model is hard work. Knowledge work still is work. So anytime you're working on a task, anytime anybody's working on a task, you are spending 3 kinds of mental horsepower. It's not one or the other. We're always spending all 3. The issue is at what ratio are we spending them? And by the way, we have a limited amount. You use it up, and that's when you go, I'm brain fried. May I be excused? My brain is full. So baked in, or what's called intrinsic, is the difficulty of the problem. Sorting an alphabet is easier than doing linear algebra. It takes less baked-in effort. Waste is things like people whispering in your ear while you're trying to sort. Distortion, distraction, anything that makes you use mental effort with no reward. Whatever's left over is our return on cognitive investment. We would like to use some of that green, that solving, towards contributing towards wide mind, towards shared understanding. When as part of a system of humans, contributing to that wide mind is work for me, I would like to convert some of that waste into effort that I can use towards forming that wide mind. Here are the two most common kinds of waste I see in most organizations, enough that I no longer even facepalm. I just kind of go, yep, par for the course. That's how we run our organizations. Fragmented people, which is fragmented minds, and fragmented work. Fragmented people. People who have half-an-hour meetings back-to-back on their calendar. You cannot focus in a day. Has anyone ever gone home and said, man, I did a lot today, and I didn't get anything done? There's chuckling, right? We can relate to that. When we fragment our minds, we're spending most of our time transitioning, and that's mostly waste. If we had a Kanban delivery system that had 50% flow efficiency, we would say, how can we improve that sucker? But we regularly use a 50% flow efficiency on our minds every day. The other is routing work around. I'm going to assign this task to you. Oh, you assigned it back to me. I forwarded you on the email chain. Please review, please review, please review, please review, please review. Can we meet? So when we defragment our minds and when we defragment our work, we actually reduce some of that waste and we make it available so that we can do all these things that I'm talking about, like challenging your models and maintaining team awareness. A couple of different ways I've seen that happen. One executive, and I mean this was the senior director, had a meeting on their calendar that was called focus time. And it was only 2 hours a week, but it was 2 hours a week that you could not book, and it was 2 hours a week that she would sit down and say, all right, what do I really need to do for my team this week? Focus time. The other, any fans of mob programming in the audience? Anyone heard of mob programming? Few? Okay. All right, so I am a fan. And it's basically where you get a cross-functional team together and you grab a story and you burn on it until it's done. So I suggested this to a group and they said, well, that's kind of weird. Usually we share the work, but let's give it a try. And the result was from an email from one developer, working in the way that we were prior, I would have estimated about a month of effort, even with 3 developers due to the massive changes. However, in 5 days, a fully code-reviewed feature was redesigned and re-implemented. Focus. Little tip, if you're having difficulty selling mob programming above the technical layer and into leadership, call it what it really is. Focused delivery. That sounds good, right? Yeah. Wait, you want a mob? No, we want to do focused delivery. Oh, okay, well that sounds good in that case. And it doesn't have to be for programming. We could do mob product road mapping. We could do mob hiring interviews. We could do mob budgeting even, if that's something that's on your plate. There's lots of ways to pull waste out of the organization. So last tip. Wide mind doesn't come from just communication and transmission of information. It comes from connected knowledge. So this is our typical picture of communication. It's transmitting information. I've got some data, I send it to you, you understand it, it goes back. The problem is that when we have enough rapid communication, we get something different. We get connecting concepts. This is how wide mind forms. This is an emergence of shared understanding. Example, I watched a conversation between a product lead and a security lead, and the product lead said, I'd like you to come visit with our team and help us out with some of our security user stories. And the security lead said, user stories, what are those? And the product lead explained, said, well, it's a card and it's got this format. And the security lead said, oh, I get it, it's like a use case. And the product lead said, what's a use case? And the security lead explained that. And the point is not that neither of them accurately described what a user story is. The point is they connected concepts from their differing disciplines to form shared knowledge. This works really well on small agile teams. That's why we do the 7 ± 2 rule. That's why we have small teams. Just talk to each other and you will connect knowledge really, really well. Okay, but what about for much larger problems? This doesn't scale well. The old Project Management Institute of the more people you add, the more number of connections grow. So when we scale, typically what we do is we throw in a boss, or a single point of contact, or a project manager, or Jira, or something that allows us to take that transmission of information from the individual people, put it in a common place, and roll it up. Problem with that? We start losing critical meaning. There's no connected knowledge. So try using this thing called a boundary object. A boundary object is anything that is information that's common to different people, it's used in different ways, and it provides equal utility to everybody. Most common ones, any thoughts, boundary objects in your organization that you might see? Common to different people, used in different ways, no particular structure. Anyone can publish, anyone can subscribe. So wiki, all right, what else?
A water cooler.
A water cooler, maybe. It's a place to gather, but that's probably more transmission of information. There's no persistence. There's no actual shared area for moving information around. Say again? One more time? War rooms and cards and big visible displays, absolutely. There are all kinds of ways to have effective boundary objects in our organizations. And rather than get into the nitty-gritty out of them, because as I said, I'm a nerd, let's look at what would happen if Hall & Oates wrote one of their most famous songs using a boundary object. So what we will see here is we can see who's working. We can see who's waiting. We can see what we agree on. We can see what we disagree on. We can tell if we're getting convergence on an idea or not. And we can tell when we're done. All right, so fun ad from Google Docs, but it illustrates the key points. Everybody can read and write. It's signaling versus running queries, and it shows awareness of tasks and awareness of team all at the same time. There's lots of different ways to do this. How you design your board, how you design your tickets, how you design your wiki, just using a whiteboard. A critical act of leadership in complexity is in a meeting, standing up, grabbing a pen, going to a whiteboard, and just starting to write what people are saying. When people see what they're thinking, they interact with it differently. I can go into this a lot. This is a big passion for me, and this has a lot of implications for distributed teams as well. The more rigid the tool, the more locked down it is, the more the structure is owned by someone other than the people who are using it, the less it's a boundary object and the more it's just a data repository. It's an information refrigerator. All right, so those are 4 truths about the elements that make up a complex human system, namely our minds. Those are 4 tips that we can take from those truths. But if we want to lead in the time of complexity, simply understanding some common truths about the people in the system is not enough. We need to understand how systems form and how to steer systems. As I said, the gift of complexity is that it brings emergence. And if you know some truths common to all parts of the system and you understand how emergence works, then you can shape the system, you can steer the system, you can lead the system. If you own a company, if you're a director, if you're an executive, if you're an agile coach trying to get people to change their behavior, trying to get an agile adoption to roll out, that's shaping a complex adaptive system of human beings in knowledge work. So the key thing about managing or leading in an emergent system, in a complex system, is it takes the right touch and it takes a light touch. And we'll look at both of those, one with an exercise, but first we'll look at it by considering multiplayer video games. Does anybody besides me in this room enjoy playing video games with other people online? Oh good, there are more nerds. Awesome. Here's the thing. This is not a waste of time. I promise. Multiplayer video games are knowledge work. They're very fast. They're time critical. There's low error tolerance. Right? You die, you let your teammate down, they are going to let you know. It's not physical work. It doesn't necessarily use the same parts of our brain that the soccer players use. If you want to understand the future of knowledge work in this distributed complex age, look to esports. There is a reason why esports is exploding these days. So, case in point, this game is called Destiny. I had a group of people that I played with together, and the basic game, you don't really need to know the details of it or what the backstory, but the basic game is the same as most basic games. We have a team, there's another team. We move, we aim, we shoot. Our goal is to shoot the other folks on the other team. That's the game. So what? The meta game, The bigger picture, the reason why this is interesting, is that we have to rapidly, accurately, and continuously form a shared mental picture of the battlefield. We have to rapidly, accurately, and continuously form a shared mental picture of what we're doing and what the opposition is doing so that we can figure out how to win. And at first, it was absolute chaos, and it was a lot of dying, and we, frankly, sucked. And I said, okay, there's something we can do here. I know how wide minds work, but no one's going to sit down from my team here and listen to a lecture. So what I'm going to do is to start modeling the behavior. And I took a very light touch. And all I did was anytime I was running around, I stopped talking about, oh no, I'm dead again. And I started talking about where I was, what I saw, and what I needed. Where I was, what I saw, and what I needed. That's just what I happened to pick. And as I started doing that, other teammates started doing that as well. And then I had started talking about it in the post-game debriefing. Hey, good job telling us where you were. I really knew what was going on. And it amplified, and it amplified. And pretty soon, we started winning games. And pretty soon, we started winning games consistently. And as you can see from the texts I was receiving, people were actually having fun for a change. And because the game actually tracks individual stats, we could actually see that individually we were doing better too. So I said, oh, this is working really well. In for a penny, in for a pound. I can make it even better. And so I started directing people, and I started saying, hey, make sure you tell us where you're going. Hey, are you in that room? Hey, Cupcake and Zen Wolf, you should pair up together. So that was about a year ago, and we don't actually play together anymore. And I actually don't talk to one of them anymore. So the lesson here is if you start driving for the perfection in the game, the execution, you might miss an opportunity to foster the metagame, which is the wide mind, the team mind. So I mentioned light touch and right touch. So this is an opportunity to perturb the system. You want to use the right touch at the right time. So last exercise we're going to close out with. What we're going to do here is, the simple form is, I'm going to start a metronome here, and it's going to provide a count, and it'll provide a cadence. And it's just going to tick, 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 and it'll provide a cadence. And everybody, if you have a keychain light, grab it. And if we can dim the lights at this point a little bit so that we can see our flashlights a little bit better, that would be good. Maybe just a little bit. Awesome. And what you're going to do, and you don't need to do it yet, but what you're going to do is to count. And as the metronome ticks, tick, 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 you mentally, silently count to yourself 1, 2, 3. And when you reach 10, flash your light during that time of 10. That's it. Flash your light during the time of 10. I don't care if anybody starts at the same time or not. I don't care what else is going on, that's it. When you reach 10, flash your light, and you loop back around, and you start counting from 1 again. All right, so here comes the metronome. This is it. Just hold up your lights so that we can all see. You can start at 1 whenever is appropriate for you.
So it's kind of sporadic. There's a little cluster here and there. Different folks started at different times. Interesting. Looks like some folks started.
Okay, we can stop that. And now we'll try a different round. What's interesting is that even though I'd said we don't have to all start at the same time, I think there was a cluster of us that started all at once. That's fine. What I specifically want to do this time is let's start with a bit of perturbation. Pick a number between 1 and 10, and just kind of hold it in your head. Start there. So when we all start, don't everybody start at 1. Start at 5, start at 2, start at 8. And again, same behavior. You count up to 10, and when you reach 10, you flash your light and you wrap around. All right? Let's try that. Actually, that's still this picture. But start at a random number.
Oh, now we're seeing quite a bit of sporadic work. So this is what our organizations look like at the beginning of a new initiative. We're all doing different things. We might have a common cadence. We've got quarterly billing cycles. We've got 2-week sprints. But we're all kind of doing different things, and there's no convergence. All right, cool. I'm going to stop that. And one way to get convergence is the way that we kind of accidentally got a moment ago. I could say, all right, everybody ready? Start. 2, 3. We could brute force it. And we could make sure that everybody gets training, right? And everybody knows what the process is, and we all start at 1, and we've got a bunch of coaches to run around and make sure that everybody is on the right number at the right time. That's one way that we could get emergence. Another way is this way, and here's the new rule I'm going to add. Still, you can still start at any number that you'd like. You still have to stay in sync with the metronome. You still flash at 10. But what I would like is please stand up and just kind of turn in some different directions. Just sort of face face at different directions around the room. Don't just all stand up and look at the screen. Stand up, hold up your light, and make sure that you can see other people around you. Do not simply face in toward your table. Mix it up. Let's add some randomness to the situation. And now what happens is I want you to pay attention to the lights and the people that you see at about 10 or 12 feet in front of you. Watch for flashes. And when you see a flash about 10 or 12 feet in front of you, you have to bump your count up. If you see if you're on 4 and you see a flash 10 feet in front of you, you move it up to 5 or 6. If you see a bunch of flashes, if you see 5 flashes in front of you, you might move it all the way up. Any questions? Clear on that? Stay with the metronome. Start at whatever number you like. And whenever you see a flash in about 10 to 12 feet, you're advancing your count. All right. And we're seeing pretty much what we saw the first time. Bit of sporadic flashing. Maybe extend your mental radius out a little bit. Look out maybe about 20 feet. And anytime you see a flash, you're bumping your count upward. You're skipping some numbers. Oh? Now what we're starting to see is a little bit of synchrony. Now extend your radius out even further, just pretty much as far as you can see. If you can see a light, you're bumping your count upward. If you see 4 lights, skip 4. Go all the way up to 10. If you see 1 light, skip 1. Now we're starting to see some clusterings and some patterns. And it's not everybody doing it all at the same time. But it's not quite completely random. All right, thank you. The lights are yours to keep. Big spender. All right, we can have the lights back up. Thank you. So I mentioned that the gift of complexity is that it comes with emergence. And in the 21st century, complexity is our business. I have heard people tell me, okay, all this boundary object stuff, all this wide mind stuff, all this science of mind stuff, ways to manage cognitive load, this is not our core competency. We are a product and service organization. And I would argue that if I am in a system of humans doing knowledge work together, and I do not work to foster wide minds, then I am abdicating an opportunity for leadership. If, even as an individual, I can model the behavior, and I can leverage what's been presented here, I can help organizations, and I can help my people, and I can help our peers rapidly, accurately, and continuously map reality so that we can arrive at the right solution or at a valuable innovation before the market changes, before we're outmaneuvered, before our competitors eat our lunch, or before the systems and software change. When we get outmaneuvered, complexity wins. So I started with insects. I'll end with insects. Remember, you can lead and shape the system if
You know some truths about all the parts in the system, and I gave you 4 truths about human minds. And if you remember the nature of emergence, it's not just the sum of the parts. The behavior of the system comes from something that is wider or bigger than the sum of its parts. And if you remember that, light touch, right touch, you can actually shape the system as it evolves. And this is how I shape and steer agile transformations. These are ants. They're walking around and they are leaving little pheromone trails. I'm not sure if you can see, but as they walk, they leave little trails of scent. And those little trails of scent start leading pathways to food. They start creating pathways away from enemies. They start creating pathways towards where warriors and soldiers should concentrate their efforts to really attack. Ants individually have almost 0 intelligence. Intelligence really isn't the right word. It's really just a set of basic rules. But ants as a colony are incredibly smart. Individually they're dumb. As a hive they're very adaptable. If ants can do this by leveraging emergent behavior, imagine what we humans can do by leveraging emergent behavior. Complexity is the problem of the 21st century. Emergence is the gift that is baked into that problem for you, that complexity will give you to help solve that problem. Do not reject that gift. Here are further sources and reading. If you would like to know some of my sources, there's a lot more than that. But the good news is I have just launched a very, very tiny, useless little WordPress site, widemind.org. And if you go there, it will take you to a Google group. And if you go to that Google group, we can talk. And the world needs leaders who can foster human systems and beat complexity. I will want to share resources. I want to hear stories. I want to hear questions. I want to hear examples of humans organizing together to beat complexity, or maybe examples where complexity gets the upper hand. So do please stay in touch. I would like to form a community. The more that we can form a wide mind to improve wide minds, the more that we can advance the science of leadership in the 21st century. And we've got a little bit of time, so if you have any questions or comments at this point, I'm open. Yes?
Hi there, thank you. Excellent talk. I'm curious if you have any examples from your experience of these emergent behaviors, successes in fostering emergent behaviors.
Successes in fostering emergent behaviors. Examples. Let's see. Sure. One that comes to mind was, one that immediately comes to mind was a large-scale product launch session. And we had cross-disciplinary representatives, one from architecture, one from development, one from, was it sales? Marketing, one of those two, and a couple of other representatives from the PMO. And it was sitting around a table and doing a lot of talking and pulling up some spreadsheets and going through line items on a spreadsheet. You know, just kill me. And what I said is, hey, since we're all in the same room, could we just close the spreadsheet for a moment? And we're in this beautiful room that has all these whiteboards. Can we just start writing some of this? And what I would do is, as one person was writing and another person was sitting back and talking, I would just hand pens to people. And I would say, can you make that visible? Can you just make that visible? And after about 3 days of this, as it started changing, on the 4th day, what we had was everybody was designing the new product rapid and ad hoc. Everybody was designing the new launch, taking into consideration technology, taking into consideration the sales goals, taking into consideration some of the legal issues that they had to comply to. And they were working as a group, as a hive mind, as a wide mind, to be able to come up with this, whereas before it would have just been a whole bunch of tasks. Thanks. Yeah. Other questions, thoughts, concerns? Yes?
What do you think of Dave Snowden and his work?
What do I think of Dave Snowden and his work? Good stuff. So Dave Snowden has the Cynefin model, looking at simple, complicated, complex, and chaotic decision-making frameworks. My interest is primarily in the complex and chaotic situations. And what I would say is that trying to foster wide mind when you're dealing with a simple domain, probably not necessarily needed. You can probably just break up the tasks. In general, though, that's not where the interesting problems lie. Anything else?
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, attention, and interaction. Stay wide.